Ready when you.
Hello, welcome everyone. My name is Daniel Moyer. I'm a sales support trainer here at Briggs Stratton Energy Solutions. We're getting started here this morning. We're just going to give a few more minutes for people to pop in. With me today is Nathan Heston. Welcome, Nathan.
Welcome, everyone. So thank you, Daniel. Looking forward to the topic today.
Yeah, the topic is the future of solar batteries and the grid, NEM 3.0. We're going to dive a little bit into what happened here in California and maybe why what happened in California isn't the best for some of the other states around our country. So few housekeeping items before we get started. If you have any questions during the talk, there's a Q&A button. Usually the button's either at the top or the bottom of your screen. Go ahead and put your questions in there and we'll get it answered. Nathan will probably chime in or he'll kind of ask me to address some of those questions live. This class does not have a NABCEP certificates available for it, but we're always working hard to get more NABCEP accredited classes, and stay tuned for some upcoming classes that are NABCEP accredited. Let's jump in really quick. If anybody's taken some of my courses before, we're going to do a little bit of sales stuff up front. We're going to get through it quickly and then kind of dive into the meat of the topic. One thing that's really exciting is that Briggs & Stratton and Simplified Power are one complete energy solutions provider. What that means is that we're one of only 2 companies in the country that provide both generators and energy storage systems as one manufacturer. So that means it's one tech support call. It's one company thinking about how generators and energy storage systems can complement each other rather than necessarily compete against each other. We make these engines, the generators, in the United States. Additionally, we assemble the batteries here in the United States down in Oxnard, California. So really proud to say we're made in America. What that means is, of course, American jobs, but also allows us to have a high level of quality control and also pivot and adjust when the technology advances and we're able to continually offer you guys the best products on the market. One thing that, as we're thinking about this NEM 3.0 kind of paradigm, and really what this means is that these energy storage systems are no longer kind of just going to be there for backup. Really, these are going to be what are known as grid interactive appliances in a way. And one thing that matters when you have a battery that's charging and discharging daily to help support the grid and help support you making your money back on this NEM 3.0 paradigm is a warranty. You want to make sure the battery is going to be there. We offer a 15-year warranty with unlimited cycles at 100% depth of discharge with no throughput warranty. So what that means is that if you are going to be cycling a battery every day and trying to save the money from the NEM 3.0, it's important that you have unlimited cycles. Additionally, you want to have as much usable capacity in the battery as well, and we'll let you go down to all the way down to 100% DOD. That being said, I usually like to see you keep the capacity of the battery around 20% state of charge or 80% depth of discharge. That's going to give the most cycles to your customers at the end of the warranty period. But if
Daniel,
you do bring, go ahead, Nathan.
Let me jump in for just a second. Just a quick clarification. What Daniel meant to say is no throughput limit. There is on our warranty. So you get that full 15-year warranty. You can cycle the battery as many times as you like. We don't have limitations on the amount of throughput as other companies do. So this is a true 15-year warranty.
Yeah, thank you, Nathan. Good point. A lot of other companies might say, well, whatever comes first, the throughput amount, the cycle life, we're just going to go a true 15-year warranty. Additionally, we're one of the few companies that's been around longer than our warranty period to show that we're actually going to stand behind those warranties when the time comes. Market drivers, a lot of us know these already, but really home is a haven. This kind of came out of the pandemic. A lot of people working from home, school from home. Existing infrastructure needs investment. And by that, I don't mean that the power companies aren't keeping the power lines outside our house up to code and safe. It's more about how we're looking towards the electrification of everything of our grid. And we move towards the electrification of our transportation, the electrification of our heating in our buildings, and moving away from fossil fuels. What that's really going to need is distributed assets that offer reliability, that are consumer-sided. So really, the key here is that we're going to put a lot of demands on the grid coming up, and we're going to need some innovative solutions. And I'm happy to say we can offer those here at Briggs & Stratton Energy Solutions. A growth of clean energy solutions and policies. That's the new IRA. There's a lot of cool things with the IRA, one being that you don't have to pair solar and storage together to now take the 30% tax credit. You can just take storage only and take that 30% tax credit. Additionally, there are a 30% tax credit available to commercial installers, and there's some innovative adders that can also be added to these systems. And this isn't, we don't have the time here to jump into all of them, but we're going to be diving into those a little bit deeper at other talks. But there is a lot of incentives out there on the federal level, but also take a look at some of the more local rebates as well.
Daniel, just want to point out to everyone that you know, since this talk is somewhat about the finances of energy storage systems, that you can also take that discount. That 30% is not just on the batteries, but it's also on the installation costs. It's that full system 30% back off, and you can pass some of that savings along right to your customers and let them know, hey, look, you know, the government for many reasons is trying to encourage backup power in homes and storage, right, to offset the changes and the strain on the grid. So again, that's 30% off the entire system cost, the energy storage system cost.
Yeah, exactly. And additionally, Nathan, it also, say if you need a main panel upgrade, a lot of these loads that we're going to be starting to put on homes require a main panel upgrade, maybe from 100 amp to a 200 amp service. That work, if it's deemed necessary for the installation of the energy storage system, can also be covered by the IRA tax credit. One exciting thing is that a lot of people have solar, but didn't go storage for whatever reason. So now the opportunity is really there that people that have solar, maybe they don't even realize that the solar will keep on trucking when the power is out, right? It won't, because we don't want to have anti-islanding. We don't want to be an island of power in an outage and energize the power lines. They're going to shut down. One exciting thing is that if you come out to a solar consumer, and maybe they're on one of those more favorable net energy metering, the NEM 2.0 or NEM 1.0, and we're going to define those here in a second, that you don't want to then do something to their system that's going to kick them off that more favorable rate structure and bump them onto this NEM 3.0. You can add storage, to an existing solar system and have them retain that existing NEM 2.0 rate structure. That's a really exciting. Don't want to kick somebody off what their favorable rate when you go ahead and mess with something. So keep in mind, there's a lot of opportunities out there. And with our energy storage systems, we can AC couple systems, give them the backup power. We're going to talk about the utility bill savings here. We also are one of the few companies that warranty our systems for off-grid use. That's really exciting. I know that's not the biggest market anymore. That's where I came from, working in the Pacific Northwest in Arcata, California, with Larry Schuessler at Sunfrost and AEE Solar and some of the old solar players. Our history got started in off-grid. Of course, now it's all moved to on-grid, but we still have our roots there, and we can still provide solutions for that. Already talked a little bit about the generators as well. One thing, I guess we're just going to pause right now and mention this, is that really you cannot go solar in California and make a financial return under this new net energy metering 3.0. It's just not going to pencil out. By the time you make the money back from your system, the system will have already aged out. So adding storage and to net energy 3.0 systems is really going to be key to making a financial return. What are we going to add? Well, we're going to add some inverters, batteries, potentially even a generator. So as we're looking at the middle of this picture, that's our 6K Simplify inverter right there in the middle. It's kind of the hub, if you will, of this wheel of spokes where you can take solar using 2 MPPT charge controllers built into the inverter, DC couple that solar and charge up our batteries. You can additionally use AC power generated from either an existing AC coupled system, or use a generator and then use a 2-wire signal to start up a generator, perhaps maybe if you don't have solar or it's been cloudy out. You can always send power back to grid, and we're going to talk about why sending power back to grid doesn't make sense anymore here in California in a minute. One thing I don't want to skip over is the app. We have a very powerful Energy Track app, and that's for monitoring and controlling of the system. Homeowners want to monitor their systems. How do we interact with our energy storage systems nowadays? We look at a phone. I mean, we can't all keep our faces out of these phones. So having a very robust, sleek looking app is important. And we have a team that's designed this app in-house at our headquarters out in Milwaukee. Installers really want to be able to use an app to control the system, to commission a system, and maybe do some remote reconfiguration.
Hey, Daniel, are you going to get into time of use at all in this training?
A little bit. Why don't you go ahead and bring us up to speed really quick on time of use?
I wanted to highlight, one of the things that you can do. Daniel was talking in the previous page about how you can use the inverter to be able to send power back to the grids or power your loads at specific times. And one of the creative ways that utilities make money off of the consumers is they charge more when the demand is higher for electricity. So one of the things that you can do with this app is choose when to use that power that's saved in your energy storage system. So you want to use that power when it's expensive, right? So if the utilities are charging a premium for electricity, for example, in the evening time when everybody's consuming it, you can set up the time of use with that inverter, with that energy track control system that's shown on the screen here, right? To save and use that energy when it's most expensive. And I utilize time of use with my system. Many customers are choosing to install this because they have the opportunity to enable time of use and really get the most for that saved energy that they have.
Yep. And you are forced onto a time of use rate here in California when you do go solar. So I recognize that maybe not everybody on this call is in California, but do recognize that some of the policies that we're talking about do apply to other states that don't necessarily have very robust net energy policies. And if you do, it's potential that these changes are coming your way. And so we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that. Let's just finish off products. This is what you're looking at with our energy storage system. In the middle is a 6K inverter. It can surge up to 12 kilowatts, 8 millisecond transfer time. It still has a screen on the front of the thing. So if you don't want to use the app or whatever reason that the app's not working for you, you can go ahead and still look at the screen of the inverter and tell what's happening, the state of charge of the batteries. On the left is a 4.98 lithium iron phosphate cylindrical cell battery that's outdoor rated. Like I just said a second ago, LFP, lithium ferrophosphate, is one of the safest chemistries. It's not necessarily as energy dense as some of the other cobalt-based chemistries on the market. We do have other trainings that Nathan has hosted and I'll occasionally host where we dive a little bit deeper into why chemistry matters. Stay tuned for some of those. Additionally, what matters in a lot of ways is the form factor. In our batteries, we use a cylindrical cell form factor. Think of them as AA or AAA batteries. That being said, there has been some very innovative advancements in some of the other types of form factors, such as pouch and prismatic cells as well. But sticking with the LFP chemistry, and I see a lot of the industry going this way, really make sure that you're going to have a safe battery for your homeowners and your business owners as well. Some of the other battery options we offer, it's a 3.8 kilowatt hour Phi battery. That's the one on the far left there. This is a battery, still LFP, still cylindrical cell. It comes in either 24 or 48 volts. This is a great battery for existing systems that maybe are doing a lead acid battery replacement, or if you have an older kind of type of equipment, like some older Schneider equipment, some older Outbacks that can't leverage closed loop communications from the battery. All of these batteries have battery management systems. Some are communicating, some are not. The two batteries you see in the middle, the Amplify and the Simplify, do have those closed loop communication capabilities. What does that mean? Well, it means the battery can talk to the inverter and the other equipment there and transmit its state of charge, transmit its temperature, transmit its state of health, and also auto-populate some set points. So these closed loop communication capable batteries are available for a Solarc and our Simplify inverter as well. The 4.98 battery is outdoor rated, but those two Phi and Amplify 3.8 kilowatt hour batteries are not. So if you are going to be putting those batteries outside, go ahead and stick them in our Boss 6 or our Boss 12 cabinets, what you see here on the picture. What we can do is actually take our Boss 12 cabinet, take out 6 batteries, and put our inverter in the top. You can either do our simplified 6K inverter, or you can even put a solar 12K up top. And we do that in-house in our factory. What this makes for is a very easy install. We have the bus bars and the terminal blocks all in there to really make it a quick, easy install and house it all in this nice outdoor rated NEMA 3R container. So let's jump a little bit into the history of net metering in California. The idea of backfeeding solar to the grid is relatively new. As I mentioned before, solar really got its start in off-grid. And it wasn't until the mid-90s, which is maybe kind of a long time ago now, that the idea of that sending power back to the grid was something you could do. And it all started with NEM 1.0. And really what these early net energy metering policies were designed for is to really, drive the economic growth and encourage investment in renewables. So for a number of years, right, fossil fuel industries have kind of had a monopoly on the energy generation in our state. And what we needed was some very progressive policies that really kind of leveled the playing field, if anything, kind of gave renewables a jump start and gave them the ability to get into the market. NEM 2.0 came out in 2013. In a lot of ways, it was kind of just kicking the can down the road. It kept these very favorable net energy metering policies. And I'll explain what that means now. Is under the older NEM 1.0 and NEM 2.0, when you had a solar system and you generated energy from the solar system, it would first power any loads that are on in your home. And then using a bidirectional meter, you could export power back to the grid and earn credits in kilowatt hours, that 1-to-1. So for every kilowatt hour I would send back to the grid, I would get 1 credit where I could use that kilowatt hour at the night and during the nighttime, during the winter, or when it's cloudy out. So you can see here, the blue is us consuming electricity from the grid. The green is us kind of self-supplying or solar powering the loads that are in the home at that moment. And then the yellow is what we're sending back to grid, getting that 1-to-1 kind of credit. And we have a bidirectional meter. It's the 1-to-1 net energy metering. What's happened now is we've gone from net energy metering to a net billing tariff. It's still called NEM 3.0, but now take a look. It's still historically just 1 meter. I'm not sure why NREL put 2 meters on here, but the point is that now we still have solar. We're still feeding it into loads, but if our solar production exceeds the load's demand, we're going to export back to grid. But the kicker here is that when we export back to grid, we're not getting that 1-to-1 kind of kilowatt hour credit. We're getting credited at the sell rate, which is essentially the avoided cost or what the utility would have to pay to generate that electricity at that instantaneous moment. But when we consume electricity, we're still paying the retail rate. So we're going to look at the kind of a heat map here in a second. But when I'm talking about sending back to the grid, I'm talking about 1 or 2 cents a kilowatt hour. But when we're consuming, it could be 20, 30, 40, 50 cents a kilowatt hour, depending upon if we're in one of those time of use kind of rate structure time zones, I guess I'll call it. So we still have our blue, which is us consuming power from the grid. Green is our self-consumption, and our kind of yellow is what we're sending back to grid. Now, that being said, when I just told you that you can't really make that credit, what you have to do now is store the yellow in a battery and then discharge the battery in the blue. So we're not buying expensive power at night, and we're not selling power cheap, right? We're trying to sell low, buy high. Buy low, sell high. There you go. Thank you. And one thing that I was attending a conference up in Oregon, and they were really kind of fighting against this. And I recognized this as I was attending one of the talks there. One of the things that the utility companies tried to kind of convince us that NEM 3.0 is what has to happen was, one, the California duck and poor old grandma. And that's what they kind of said is when you look at the duck curve, and if you were to Google California duck curve, you kind of pull up this kind of chart here. You might pull up a picture of a duck also. But the idea is that as California adopted solar over the years, during the day, usually during the summer, electricity generated from renewables became greater and greater over the years. And actually, about last year, during the day, during the summer, well, actually this year, 2023, the production of solar exceeded our demand. So essentially, the price of electricity went negative. What does that mean? And the utility companies and some advocates for net energy metering would say that it's not fair. It's not fair to the utilities because the utilities are having to run these power plants idle during the day and then ramp them up at night. And it was kind of setting, and who's paying for that, right? A lot of these utilities are investor-owned utilities beholden to their shareholders. So they're not going to lose money. They're going to pass that cost along. So that's one of the arguments for net energy 3.0 is, and honestly, in there is some truth to that you can't have all this excess generation that's, if the energy is not used or the power is not used at that moment, it has to go somewhere. We have to kind of think of the future of the grid as being able to store that energy, whether it's in residential sided storage, whether it's in utility sided storage, or maybe a combination of both, and then discharge that energy storage during the nighttime. As you can see at the night, all of our energy consumption ramps up in the sun setting. Additionally, during the middle of the night, right, we're still consuming power. One of the arguments was the poor old grandma, right? That there was a growing gap between the value of solar generated at the homes and the credit given to those customers. Really, the argument was only the affluent went solar. And the ones that could afford to go solar are now reaping the benefits. And the people that couldn't go solar, the grandmas, the renters, the people that didn't have the ability to add solar are paying for these other people. Now that's not been turned around a little bit. There's a lot of low income subsidies, and we've seen also that more median income people have also gone solar. But I would still argue that the smart people, really, in a way, that went solar are taking advantage of this. The point being, up in Oregon, is they haven't reached what's known as solar saturation yet, right? Their duck curve, the Oregon duck curve, doesn't look like this yet. They may still be up here in 2015. So what they need to do is remain on a more favorable net energy metering policy to still encourage the development of renewable energy systems, right? You got to make sure that the guys in the trucks that are out there installing solar are still able to make the sales and still able to make it work for the customers that they're driving around to. So in California, yes, we do recognize that it's not sustainable what we were doing here, but the argument could also be said that we need to ramp down or structure it in such a way that we don't just drop off the cliff. And there has been some pain here in California. Again, there's a lot of things, complicated concepts when we're talking about this, and we're looking past just what a homeowner might be thinking about, what a utility might be thinking about, or what our whole energy infrastructure might be looking at.
So Daniel, you've made the argument that solar doesn't make a whole lot of sense without batteries financially. At least you can't get a return on your investment. But when you look at in California now with batteries, can you make a return on your investment, and what does that turnaround time look like? Is it highly specific, or is it similar to what it was with solar, given that 30% tax credit?
It's definitely your payback period, which is what every customer wants to know when they're looking at your proposal. The payback period is going to go up. And we have to also recognize that when you add storage, though, you're giving them energy resilience. So I get this a lot. Generator installers might say, well, solar's too expensive and it's not paying itself off. And my argument is, what's the payback period on a generator? There is none, right? The payback period on a generator, gas generator, is peace of mind. So I think looking at now, you can make a financial return in California with solar plus storage. The payback period is going to be a little bit longer, but keep in mind, what is the value of having energy resiliency? What is the value of not losing all of your food in your freezer when the power goes out? And additionally, when we start to think about adding more loads, so you can always get a faster payback period when we start to add more loads. And I got your example coming up, Nathan. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but you still have a gas bill. You still
Yep.
have a gasoline bill at the pump for your car. So what if we start to think about taking some of those loads from your gas furnace, your gas dryer, and moving them over to electric? What if we start thinking about not paying $5 a gallon in gas, which is what we're paying here in California,
No,
and
I pay
taking those over?
$6.50.
So
I
so
buy diesel, so yes, it's very expensive out here.
so the payback period is very variable, and it depends really on how many loads we can move over to electric. And also to keep in mind that there's other untangible benefits to having those storage systems.
Sure.
This was a great kind of chart that I found on the CPUC, and it kind of broke down NEM 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. And really what I kind of want to point out here is really credits for energy exports. Before, really, you would get credited for the cost that you paid to import it. Now, really, you're going to get credited with what the power company would have had to pay if they had to buy that energy elsewhere. One thing to keep in mind is that there's also the interconnection fee kind of stayed the same. I want to jump down here is that it went from what's known as an annual true up, right? So during the NEM 1.0 or NEM 2.0, if you generated a lot of excess kilowatt hours in the summer, you could use them up in the winter. Now, what we're doing here, and you would have a bill, right? And if I design your system correctly, you would get a true up bill from your homeowners and from the utility, and it would say, okay, well, you either owe us something or we owe you something. And if they happen to owe you something, you'd get paid out at wholesale rate. And that was always kind of tricky because a lot of homeowners, one, if we installed your system in winter, you'd get alarmed that you're going negative, 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 and then wait till summer and it starts bouncing up. But a lot of times those true up, like where you're at that moment, are buried on page 5 or 6 of the bill. Now what it is, it's a monthly true up. And so it's right on the front of the bill. This is what you owe this month. So that they changed that around, and you credits, basically those nothing credits would get rolled over. Another big change though is, and this kind of goes back to what I just mentioned, before you could really only install solar, the size of the solar could really only be designed to offset the current loads in the house. But what we're saying now with this new Net Energy 3.0 is go ahead and oversize it. Go ahead and add a lot more with the anticipation that you're going to be buying an electric vehicle, that you're going to be get rid of that gas furnace and get the heat pumps installed, and really start to leverage that. So this was a great chart that I found here, and there's the link if anyone wants to take a look at it. So I don't know if anybody on this call has ever watched or ever read Home Power. It was a great magazine. It's out of print now, but preparing for this talk and kind of going back and doing a little bit of my research, I was, well, what did we think about net energy metering back in the day? And I kind of took these two articles. One of them was when NEM 1.0 was kind of coming into play, and one was when Net Energy NEM 2.0 was coming into play. And I pulled up some of these graphs here. And what we're looking at here again is going back to those NREL documents where green is our production that is exceeding the demands of the home loads, which is the blue. And red is what we're consuming from grid. So the idea that I just had kind of tried to articulate is that when you send power back to the grid under NEM 3.0, you're getting paid essentially nothing, like 1 or 2 cents a kilowatt hour. That would be the green. But when I'm consuming power, the red, I'm paying 30, 40 cents a kilowatt hour. So the idea, in order to make the financial payback make sense, which is Nathan had just asked us, we need to store the green in a battery and then discharge the green in the red to make us get some green. Keep in mind also that there is variations over the course of the year, and you can't really store energy in the summer in a battery and discharge it in the winter. So you're going to see those kind of payback change a little bit going towards the winter.
Hey, Daniel, can you just go back a couple of slides?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that you really nope, back to the green and that graph. I think you really summed up what's happened with NEM 3.0 versus NEM 2.0 now. It used to be it was a one-to-one exchange for the energy that you would sell back to the grid and the energy that you would buy from the grid, so that you would buy and sell basically at the same rate. And what you just said here really makes me feel like I understand the new paradigm, right? And that is, when you sell back to the grid, the green, you get pennies on the dollar, a couple of cents per kilowatt hour. When you buy in the red, they're charging you 30, 40 cents per kilowatt hour. So it's no longer 1-to-1 anymore. It's not net energy metering. It's net billing, right? And the problem here is that you're really not getting much value out of that green if you export it back to the grid. And one of the themes of our talk is, if you do store that excess energy in batteries, you can discharge those batteries in the red. You can even set the system up. If you're using RESS or Solarc, you can set that system up with time of use discharge so that you specifically offset those highest costs, that 40 cent per kilowatt hour charge that you get at 7 p.m., for instance. And I thank you. This was a really good graph to kind of explain the challenge of making the finances work. And when you add batteries, I was talking to Enphase, a representative from Enphase that was modeling their payback time, and they were saying it's around 8 years now in California. It used to be about 5 years with NEM 2.0. You get your system paid off in 5 years and then have free electricity after that. Well, Enphase is claiming about 8 years. Of course, it varies from home to home, but it gives you a rough idea. You can still, with this new paradigm, save that green with batteries, discharge it in the red, and make your money back in 8 years, and then have a system, and at least in our warranty, get another 7+ years of warranty service out of your system with free electricity after that, right? Yeah. So the finances do pencil out now. And as the cost of batteries come down, that payoff time will come down. And to your point, after that payoff time is over, you're making a return on it.
Yep. And like you have, great point, Nathan, is that it's still going to keep chugging along for at least 15 years and perhaps more. So I guess another kind of way to think of it is
Daniel, I just want to bring your attention to the Q&A, because some people are commenting on there, and I think you're better positioned to be able to answer these questions. So if you don't mind,
go ahead,
have a look at the questions.
Can you read one for us?
Sure. So Scott says, with NEM 3.0 in California, is there any reason to send electricity back to the grid anyway? With no feed-in, it eliminates the approval process from the power company. What are your thoughts around that?
Well, I would say this is that even if you're not going to be sending power back to the grid, if you start to add a solar energy storage system to your house, you need to get it permitted, and you need to let the utility know what you're doing. But that being the case, is that you should still essentially off-grid the home, right? You don't want to send anything, you don't want to consume anything. I hope
so. Daniel, you're going to address this though, because there are times when it does make sense to send it back to the grid, and I think you're going to come to that.
It's right here.
Perfect. Let me read a couple more questions. John says, in the winter, can you set the battery to charge from the grid during off-peak hours, then discharge during peak hours? Daniel?
So you have to be careful with that. You can charge from solar and still take the IRA, but when you start to charge the battery from grid and send back to grid, it gets a little more tricky, and talk to your tax professional about that. But the idea is you're not here to make money off of the utilities. Go ahead, Nathan.
I don't mean to interrupt, but John was not saying sell back to the grid. And I think the answer to your question, John, is yes. In the winter, you can set the battery to charge from the grid during off-peak hours and then discharge during peak hours. And that absolutely, you can discharge to your loads, to Daniel's point, during peak hours. You cannot sell back to the grid if you've pulled from the grid.
But if you charge from green sources, solar, you can discharge that battery to grid
and sell it back to the grid.
Sell it back to the grid. And everybody is probably looking. I know we probably have some more questions here, Nathan, but I just want to bring up is that, when do you think everyone's going to be selling back to the grid based on what you see here on this chart?
So what are we looking at, Daniel? These are buyback. This is utility money paid to the customer per kilowatt hour. So if you look at a lot of those, I mean, Daniel said pennies on the dollar, 0.009 per kilowatt hour. That's less than 1 penny per kilowatt hour on some of these days. 0.001. You'd have to sell 10 kilowatt hours to get 1 cent from the utility. So great point. Can you explain what we're looking at?
Yeah, so exactly. It's the export compensation rate. It's the rate at which the utilities will compensate you for sending power back to the grid based on different months of the year, based on different hours of the day. And really what this is kind of like what the value or what the utility would have otherwise had to pay for that energy. And again, everyone, I can't wait for next September when everybody in the state starts discharging their batteries to the grid. It's going to be quite the event. But this is essentially this. And one thing, if anybody wants to dive a little bit deeper into this topic, I would encourage you to join the California Solar and Storage Association. When you join this amazing organization, or if you're in a state that doesn't, if you're not in California, consider joining one of these kind of sister corporate associations. They're out there fighting to make sure that we keep some of these favorable net energy meterings. And then if they are going to switch us over to something that's, going to be necessary, and there's no doubt about it, solar and storage for the health of the grid needs to be combined. We can't just have just solar, but we need to do it in a way that's equitable. We need to do it in a way that doesn't destroy some solar installer that's out there trying to get green energy on roofs. Being part of California Solar and Storage Association, there's this members only page, and that's what you're seeing on the right hand side is all of these amazing resources that are available under NEM 3.0 for some of these systems. Nathan, before I go on, is there any other questions?
Yes, there are a couple more. Nestor says, what is the cost per watt when discharged to grid? I think he's asking exactly what we're showing on the screen. How much do you get per kilowatt hour when you discharge to the grid? And if, Nestor, if I misinterpreted your wording there, please correct me. Joe says, have you run a LCOE analysis for your system in the new California context? And that's LCOE is levelized cost of energy, in case you're not familiar with it. And essentially what that is to take the expected lifetime of the system. So for our batteries, that's 10,000 cycles, right? And compare that versus other systems that have different lifetimes, for instance, lead acid or smaller depths of discharge, etc. We haven't done detailed analysis, Joe, on systems just because they are so specific. But I can tell you that Daniel has pointed me to Aurora Solar and then Open Solar for resources to tell you payback period. And so it's very specific to a system. So I haven't done one on my home. I'm not sure. I don't think Daniel's done one on his home either.
Yeah, and we're going to jump into some Aurora here in a second as well. Great point,
Okay.
Nathan. And here we are. One thing is that say we don't have a battery. Now again, if what we're doing is imagine you have a home and you have solar and the solar is kicking, it's sunny, nice sunny afternoon, and you have some loads on the home, not a lot of loads, and all the loads are being supplied by that solar. And if it doesn't make sense to sell back to the grid and the loads are satisfied, essentially all of that PV production is being wasted. So what we want to do again is store it. You're going to maximize your usage of that energy, that solar produced energy. Now let's just take a step back though, and so you're getting more energy out of your roof that would otherwise be wasted. Now with Aurora, they had a really unique kind of article. Say you don't have solar. One way to think about this is when you're doing self-consumption, if you're able to, this chart is what it's showing is that self-consuming is better, and because you get more money on the return. So if we're looking at this light blue here, this is what we're being exported to the grid, and this blue is our self-consumption during off-peak, and then this kind of peach color here is self-consumption during on-peak. And you would think that, okay, the volume of this blue is a lot greater than the volume of this peach color, but the rate at which you're kind of saving money or making money is much greater. So although the volume of this this peach color isn't big, it's still at a much greater value. And it's a little hard to see, but you can even see this little sliver of export on on peak though, again, it's kind of showing here that the idea is that what we want to do is self-consume as much as possible.
Go back just for one
Yeah,
second,
go ahead.
Daniel. I'm going to remind you of a couple of questions we got. So Mark says, hey, talk about the IRA. If you use North American supply chain in a U.S. factory, you'll be getting $45 per kilowatt hour battery subsidy. And Mark, that's a great point. I do want to highlight for those that are in California, since we are listed, our batteries are listed as made in California, you can get an extra credit back from applying. And Daniel, do you know anything about the specifics of that?
I don't want to dive into the specifics because I want to make sure I do a little more research, but there's adders available, and there's also for commercial systems the ability to take a production tax credit rather than the IRC or IRA system as well.
So Daniel, there's another question I think you're well suited for, given your experience with generators. Thomas asks, with a very high time of use charges, would it make sense to use a generator and pay for the fuel to charge the battery during cloudy days so it not have to buy electricity from the grid? I think the answer is no, but I'm going to let you go ahead and take this one.
Yeah, that's a tricky one. And if it's 50 cents a kilowatt hour, we'd have to do some math. How much are you paying for the propane? How the oil changes on the generator, the wear and tear on the generator. You would have to pencil that out a little bit, but that's a good point. I think at some point, if energy is expensive enough, it will pencil out at some point. I don't like the idea of a fossil fuel generator running in everybody's yard. I think with the economies of scale, you could probably be more efficient for the environment by running a larger kind of co-op generator as well.
Daniel, another question here. Can the utilities change the September export compensations rates, say in 2025? Do they have the?
Yes, so it's not locked in, and I got a slide coming up on that. It's going to be changing. It's an evolving thing here.
So Mark also points out a couple of interesting things here. He says that slashes the time to pay back if you're getting those incentives from using a California manufacturer. And like I said, if you were installing in California, you do get discounts because we are a California manufacturer. He also says part of that is million-mile motors for electric vehicles. You could save money by replacing your car or truck. I think I'm not quite getting this. You save money you would spend replacing your car or truck with an internal combustion engine. And that's a good point that Daniel highlights a lot, is that if you are going to start installing solar and storage, you end up finding ways to start using more electricity because now it's cheap for you. So thanks for allowing time for those questions, Daniel. I'll let you know when we get more comments and questions coming in.
Thank you. And I think that's a great point, is if you're going to come out and put solar and storage on someone's house, don't stop there. Try and sell them an EV charger with it. Try and sell them a heat pump. And if you're not able to equip to sell it, partner with somebody that does do that, give them a referral, and then show them that that IRA is not just solar. There's other rebates and tax credits available for some of these other projects. Before we move on, I just want to make sure we're clear on this graph here. This dotted blue line here, that is the home's consumption, right? So you're using a lot in the morning, you go off to work, and then you use some more in the evening. This is the solar production. So it's almost as one's dipping, one's going up, right? The black line is the production of the solar system during the day. And what I had mentioned is that if you don't have a battery, that you want to essentially have west-facing arrays. I think west-facing arrays are going to become more common here in California, and here's why. Is that what we want to do is shift, right? The blue dashed line hasn't changed. It's still consuming power in the morning, less power in the afternoon, and then in the evening, your consumption goes up. What this is showing is by shifting this or pointing the solar array to the west, what we're doing is we're shifting the production curve later into the day. So we're self-consuming during more of those peak times. And even if you do have a battery paired, by shifting the production curve to later in the day, we're going to kind of keep us on solar and keep us producing and keep that battery charged later into the evening, avoiding us from having to to start discharging the battery. And if we've sized the battery properly, sure, we could go through the whole night. But if we're, just kind of keeping that production later in the day. So if anyone's on here, maybe put it in the comments. Are you already thinking about this? Of course, you're limited by the site specific situations. Maybe the homeowner has trees on the west side. Maybe they don't have a good west facing kind of roof, or a lot of gables or plumbing vents or something like that. But Aurora had a great article on that. It's linked below. Another kind of idea here is, why don't we instead of adjusting the solar production curve, let's adjust the consumption curve. And one way to do that is using load shedding. Lumen, Span, a lot of these other companies can automatically, without you even doing anything, start to adjust the load profile. What does that mean? Maybe we turn the hot water heater on during the day. You got an electric hot water heater. We run the electric hot water heater during the day, and then we shut the electric water heater off at night. It's a 100-gallon tank. It's an 80-gallon well-insulated tank, right? You're still going to have a bunch of hot water in that tank. But so this is showing it over here on the right, is how we adjust the load profile to get a better return on our money. And EV charging is a big one on that, right? We're not going to start charging. We're not going to drive home and plug our EV right into the wall right when time of use rates, right? We're going to program the EVs don't even need the lumen, right? The EVs can do it themselves and start charging later in the day. So there's a couple of things, and I'm really excited as I'm going to start driving through all the neighborhoods, Nathan, and start thinking about all the west-facing arrays that I'm starting to see rather than opposed to south-facing. This was another one, great, and I'm not going to, there's a lot of text here. I just want to kind of jump through a few of them. We already talked about, well, if there's a true-up, I just said you're getting, a true-up when they get billed monthly. Why is there still a yearly true-up? And it's really that if you have more credits than the usage excess, you get paid out that wholesale. Not much really changed there, but really you're still going to get billed every month. Somebody asked this, how often will those export rates be updated? And it's going to be updated every 2 years. Customers that install in 2023, 2024 will have the first 9 years of values from that version locked in. So again, it will change. It's going to be that always evolving. And companies like Aurora, companies like Open Solar that are trying to model those payback periods that somebody had asked earlier are really going to have the work cut out for them, because I showed you that one map, that heat map, where there's a different price of electricity for export rates for every hour of every day of the year. Companies like Aurora Solar are going to need to analyze that stuff and put it together in their program. So when we just come along and slap some panels on the roof and model out a roof, that we're really showing the customers, showing the business owners a proposal that is accurate and really gives a real life kind of modeling of what an expected payback could be for them exact system. What if you sell your house and the existing system's on NEM 1 or NEM 2? Do the new people that move into the house have to go switched over to NEM 3? No, they don't. Although you're still, say there's like 5 years left on the old net metering, that's what the new homeowner is going to inherit, if you will. Can I add a battery? I already talked about this, to an existing system. Yes, you can, without altering their NEM status. This last one I kind of like. So say you got some solar on the roof. Say you got an inverter and you want to add solar, but you don't want to kick them off that old NEM, that old favorable net energy metering. You can. And how it goes really is that, say the solar inverter, say it's a 6,000 watt inverter, like the Simplify inverter, it can handle, say, a certain amount of solar input into it. Well, if you haven't already maybe I already had existing 5,000 watts on solar and I add 1,000 watts, well, I'm increasing the size of the system. But if I had already had 6,000 watt inverter and I had 6,000 watts of solar on the roof, and now I go to add 1,000 or 2,000 watts of solar, they're not going to lose their favorable. So it's kind of the headroom in the inverter. Why would you want to do this, right? Why would you add more solar to an inverter than it can handle? Well, one is that it would provide more kind of production in the morning and more production in the evening. It would clip. You would get some inverter clipping is what it's called. But the shoulders, right, the kind of the shoulder of that curve, of the production curve, would open up, and the volume of that shoulders opening up, and a lot of times will be greater than what, to to some point would be greater than what you're clipping off the top. And by having production later into the evening, we're kind of going back to that west facing array kind of idea that we're producing later into the afternoon, avoiding us from having to start buying electricity at those expensive time of rates. So again, if you haven't joined one of these solar associations, I encourage you to join California Solar and Storage Association. If you're in a different state, look up some of those local ones.
Daniel, before you jump into the buckets here, Joe asks, do the utility companies discourage the solar plus storage strategy of buy low / sell high? And can they keep us from doing this? Is this considered energy arbitrage? I think the answer is they don't really discourage it, right? I think the whole point of NEM 3.0 was to push the storage needs to the customer. But I'm going to let Daniel's more experience.
No, I think you addressed it. That was what they were doing. Is that's the point of NEM 3.0 is really kind of offsetting this and pushing it over. And maybe it was a little more aggressive than some people had liked. Maybe in certain states like Oregon, where they don't have solar saturation yet, right, where their solar during the day is only making up 2 or 3% of their grid production, it doesn't make sense, and they may push that in such a way that isn't going to make the future of our grid solar powered. Nathan, did you want to add to that? I wasn't sure if I got that.
No, you got it. I just wanted you to hear Joe's question.
Yeah, thank you. So when we're sitting down at the homeowner and we're sitting at the kitchen table, one thing is always ask open-ended questions, listen to what they say, don't talk, run. That's how I always get that, is they say something, I just want to start spewing out words, right? Listen to what they say. What are they talking about? Is backup important to them? Is looks important to them? Is the ROI important to them? Write that stuff down, and then you can use that information later when you're trying to get them to close it and say, well, you mentioned this or you mentioned that. Let me tell you why our systems are good for this or good for that. But one of the things, and this was kind of a bucket, and I got this from Josh Brum at Solagent. He had kind of come up with some of this, is think about what bucket people are falling into. Ask them, how often do they have power outages? How do you envision solar working for them? Bucket one, which I don't see a lot of people falling into, is essentially they only want storage for financial payback. They don't really have many outages, or they don't care about outages. And I've never really thought of this, and I guess it could be possible, is that you put batteries on a home, but no backup, right? So you still have a battery, but there's no critical load subpanel. If the power goes out, the battery goes out, the solar goes out. Why would you do that? Is because there's less install costs, so you can get them in the door cheaper. But my kind of head, my opinion, is that if you're already out there doing the main panel upgrade, you're already out there putting batteries, you're already out there doing solar, it's not a lot of extra work to just pull some conduit, pull a little sub panel, and back up some of the loads. And that would be bucket number 2, right? You have kind of a minimum sized battery, get them the backup, get them the ROI, and get them in that kind of new ability to pay the system off if they didn't have solar only, which they wouldn't be able to do. Bucket number 3, that's kind of the I hate the grid, I'm a prepper kind of person, where you're really trying to avoid them from having to use power from the grid or power from the grid at all. And one way you'd want to use is pairing some of our simplify inverters up, or using a Solar 15K. I know we're running close on time, everybody, so I'm going to kind of go through this quick. This is Nathan's house. Nathan's uses about 300 kilowatt hours a month for the course of the year.
It's gone up, but yes.
If we break Nathan's consumption down into days of the month, we see he uses about 10 kilowatt hours a day. And we can break it down and look about how many kilowatt hours he uses for hours of the day. And that yellow circle there is showing us how we need to be able to store energy where those solar would be produced, and then discharge it in the blue. What I'm kind of showing you guys this for is one, Nathan doesn't spend a lot. If he's paying 30, 25 cents a kilowatt hour on average, 300 kilowatt hours, he's paying less than $100 a month. But he still has a gas bill. He still has a gasoline bill, or diesel in your case, Nathan. So what we want to do is try and move loads over, right? Let's move them over to gas. And one way we've really kind of been able to simplify some of these sales of solar battery systems is creating these packages. So I just told you a minute ago that Nathan uses about 10 kilowatt hours a day. And what we can do is, instead of selling people kilowatt hours and this or that, let's just sell them hours of backup. When you start to think about outages, and there's been a lot of research that's shown this, is that many outages are what are just known as nuisance outages, like 2-3 hour outages where somebody has crashed their car into the power line down the street. A lot of outages aren't as long as you might expect, and excluding earthquakes, excluding Cascadia events or hurricanes. But what we can do is, I know Nathan only uses 10 kilowatt hours a day, and I can see right there that I could sell him hours of backup. We did some research. We actually discovered that most people, unlike Nathan, which only uses about 400 watts continuously in his house, a lot of people use about 1,200 watts in their house continuously. So 1,200 watts times 24-hour period is more like 28 maybe kilowatt hours a day. Nathan's at 10, remember? But we also recognize that people that are using backup power are probably going to turn stuff off as they're kind of in that outage. So somebody that's using 1,200 watts continuously is probably going to go down to about 600 watts continuously. That's where we got these numbers. So if you're using 600 watts continuously, you're going to get about 18 hours of backup. Nathan, who's only using 400 watt continuously, about 10 kilowatt hours a day, it can get that middle package. Nathan's going to go with the 18 hours, but he's going to actually get 24 hours out of that system. That's his system. That's Nathan's house. We're looking at a Simplify inverter, 3 batteries, backed up loads panel on the left. This is the Energy Track app on the right, kind of showing the configuration. Do note over here that we can adjust the battery reserve level. So if we know a big storm's coming in, we can adjust the reserve level and bump it up a little, not allowing the battery to be completely used for time of use arbitrage. More shots of the inverter, the Energy Track, sorry. We also sell the packages in our Simplify batteries as well. These are the 4.98 outdoor rated batteries. Quickly, we're going to run through some diagrams, then we'll finish this off here on time. This is what it can look like when you set the system to grid-tied backup only mode. We're showing you on the right here is what we would program our Energy Track app to do. Essentially, in this programming situation, we got grid, we got non-backed up loads, we got our inverter, backed up loads, we got some solar with our AP smart rapid shutdown devices. The inverter has a AP systems rapid shutdown transmitter built into it, so you don't need that. These are the 2-panel ones. I need to change that. And we have some batteries down here. This system is basically going to sit there waiting for an outage. If there is an outage, these batteries will start backing up the home. In this example, we're actually going to be what's known as a grid-tied zero export, where this system is going to do everything it can to not import electricity or ever export electricity. This is kind of the system that you would want to set up for those kind of California systems to avoid having to buy or pull in energy. We do have an ability to work with solar, where we can take the grid through a meter can, a disconnect, pass through all 200 amps through the solar into our whole home backup system. Here's some Boss 12 cabinets with some of our batteries in them. Midnight solar combiner going into the battery. In this example, we've also got one of our generators. This generator is a 2-wire signal to start that will start up when the batteries are low. Maybe there's no batteries, maybe there's no solar at all, or it's cloudy out. We can use the generator to charge up the batteries, shut the generator off, and kind of rinse and repeat. The generators are gaseous generators, right? So propane or natural gas. And we have some really unique systems that allow us to run our generators on natural gas that don't derate. A lot of times when you see a generator that says 22K, that's a 22K generator on propane. A lot of people have natural gas and it's going to derate. Ours don't. It's called NG Max. If anybody is an installer on this call, I please encourage you to join our Elite IQ Installer program. Email me. My email is going to pop up here in a second. Scan that QR code. We'll put you on the maps. We have money eligible. We have promotions that we're constantly running to give you money back for being an IQ installer. We'll promote you in our newsletter, and also we'll send you some shirts, some hats, some pens and stuff. If you're looking for future training, Power Academy is a great resource that we have on the briggsandstratton.com. There's in-person e-learning on-demand courses, so you don't have to be here at a certain time. Additionally, check out our training calendar come up. Nathan, any last questions? If anybody wants to join that program, training at simplifypower.com.
Yeah, I think I would just point out that we do have some promotions that are running. So if you have not installed a Simplify ESS package yet, You can get $1,000 for your first system that you install if you do it by the end of the year. Elite IQ installers get $25 per battery, but we're also offering a $75 additional per battery bonus through the end of the year. So Elite IQ installers per battery they're installing can get $100 back through the end of this year. And in addition, get that $1,000 off their first ESS system that they put in. So please keep that in mind. As Daniel pointed out, there are a lot of benefits to becoming an Elite IQ installer. Send us an email, training@simplifypower.com, and we can answer any questions you have about that program.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Nathan. And we'll see you guys next time.
Thank you.